My name is Frances Castaneda-Dice, and I am president of the Houston Easton Chamber of Commerce. And you're in for another treat on this business webinar during COVID-19. Today is April 30th, 2020, and tomorrow, May 1st, is Texas is reopening slowly. Some of the restaurants and businesses will be opening to 25% capacity, and we're very excited about that. Today, we're very honored to introduce you to our speaker, Jovan Vojvodic. He is going to be speaking to you about a wonderful program called NextSeed Financing Product for Business. And so he'll be on very shortly. After he talks, at the very bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A button. If you wouldn't mind clicking on there and type in the questions that you would like us to ask Jovan, and we will get those out to him before we leave today. This broadcast will be placed on our website so that you can share it with other people that may need this information or watch it again. On the next slide is now my honor to introduce you to our speaker. So Jovan, he is the managing director of the investment banking team on NextSeed. He has this is some of his information here, but he has over 20 plus years of experience of New York investment banking and worked with some great companies like Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch. So he has a wealth of knowledge to share with you. We're excited to welcome him. And without further ado, I'll have him unmute himself and go live. Jovan?
Thanks, Francis. I really appreciate the introduction, and thank you so much for asking me to speak today. What I really wanted to talk today about was NextSeed's Community Bridge Notes, or what we call the CBNs. And I guess my thinking here was I've prepared some remarks to go through while going through some slides that I put together. And then, as you said, we can open it up for Q&A. I don't know how many people joined by video conference this morning, but for those who did, I do have some slides, one or two on NextSeed generally, and then really digging into the Community Bridge Note product. So let me see if I can forward. Okay, so the next slide here. So NextSeed, NextSeed was founded about 6 years ago as one of the first investment crowdfunding platforms. And the goal was really to democratize finance and to make previously, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get the slide right. To democratize finance and really allow small investors to invest in transactions and in companies that they hadn't traditionally done. The mission statement was to help build prosperous communities by making meaningful investments available to everyone. And NextSeed closed the first ever Texas investment crowdfunding transaction in 2016. We received the first SEC registered funding portal license in 2016. And we actually also closed the first ever nationally distributed regulation crowdfunding offering. So we've been doing this for a while, and really proud to be part of this community. Let me just click here. Okay. Over NextSeed's history, our company has really been primarily focused on capital raising on behalf of local brick and mortar businesses with a consumer focus. Until 2019, this was done by issuing securities to investors exclusively under the SEC Reg CF, or crowdfunding exemption, for transactions that were no larger than about $1 million in size. And then in 2019, we obtained our own registered broker-dealer license, which means that now as a regulated broker-dealer, we can issue securities for transactions over $1 million in size through the Reg D exemption, or what many people know as private placements. What's interesting is that since we've gotten our broker-dealer license, transaction volume has really picked up. We actually launched more transactions in the first quarter of 2020, obviously before COVID, than we had in all of NextSeed's previous years combined. And so again, on this slide, what you can see is that our transactions generally range in the size from $100,000 to $5 million. And, at least historically, have been primarily associated with hospitality, food and beverage, consumer packaged goods, and health and wellness offerings, although we're not limited to those sectors. And particularly in the context of this Community Bridge Note I'm going to talk about, we welcome businesses of any and all types to apply. In terms of the products we offer, we raise capital through both debt and equity securities on behalf of our issuers, and our products include term notes, revenue sharing notes, preferred equity, convertible debt, and safes. And we can talk about any of those types of products in the Q&A if anybody has questions. So that's a quick overview of NextSeed. What I really wanted to talk about today was the Community Bridge Note product that we rolled out very recently. And I wanted to give some context around what we were trying to do with it and also to describe exactly what it is. So, I apologize, I'm trying to get my slide working. Given our historical focus working with local small businesses, it became evident to us pretty quickly that when the COVID crisis emerged, our historical clients and small businesses generally were going to be disproportionately negatively affected by the social distancing and the stay-at-home guidelines that we've all been living with. At the same time, we recognized that there was a lot of desire from local customers, from neighbors, existing investors in these small businesses to support them through this crisis. And, obviously Congress has implemented unprecedented financial support and stimulus into the economy through the CARES Act. But, our view is that I think a couple of things. Number one, a lot of that government support ended up going to larger companies and not to the smaller businesses who might need them the most. And also in any event, government support by itself was going to be unlikely to be enough to give many businesses the runway they would need to stay afloat, to stay open until the environment normalized, and that there were many successful and historically profitable businesses who might not survive this crisis due to the drying up of their regular business cash flow. And so what we were trying to do was figure out a way for them to raise alternative forms of liquidity or working capital. And so that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to find a way to offer small businesses who had strong franchises and customer traction and who would otherwise be profitable and viable in a non-COVID environment, the wherewithal to access a lifeline to supplement their working capital needs and to do it quickly, to do it on an accelerated basis, and to get them through this crisis by issuing securities on terms which were attractive to them, while at the same time creating an opportunity for those in the community who wanted a way to support them, but also participate financially in the economic rebound when the environment normalized. So the Community Bridge Note, which I'm about to talk about, is NextSeed's product to achieve that objective. So what is the Community Bridge Note? As I mentioned, it's a working capital, it's a security that's meant to raise working capital for established businesses, to create liquidity to get established businesses that are currently profitable and have good customer traction and support through the COVID crisis. It's a debt security. It's a debt security designed to give flexibility to businesses while offering the supporters a potential for modest returns, as I've said. And it's an opportunity to support previously established and proven businesses that have been adversely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis but have a response plan in place. So from the issuer side, who's it for? This is really for businesses of all industries and sizes that are seeking working capital to weather the financial crisis. And that's, from our perspective, regardless of whether they've already applied for or received any other relief programs. And it's for businesses that were existing and in operation and profitable before the COVID emerged. So businesses that were in operation for at least 90 days before March 13th, when the national emergency was declared, and whose past performance indicated profitability or a strong trend toward profitability of COVID-19. What this is not, we do a lot of growth capital financing and early stage financing on the NextSeed platform, but the use of proceeds from these securities is not intended to be for growth capital or the expansion or acquisition of a new business. This is not meant to raise capital to restructure the company's balance sheet or to refinance existing debt. It's not acquisition capital. From the investor side, this is not a donation. We are selling securities through the NextSeed platform to investors. And so very clearly, this is not a donation that investors will be making. And this is not a secured piece of debt. In other words, there's not going to be any personal guarantees. There's not any personal guarantees. There's not going to be any security interest, any mortgage, anything like that. This is an unsecured debt structure that we are proposing. So in regard to how is it structured and some of the economics around it, let's see if I can flip this page forward. Yeah, Talia, sorry, my computer is very slow here. Okay, sorry about that. So The next page addresses how the CBN is structured. So the Community Bridge Note is a revenue sharing note, as I said, which means it's a debt security. So the issuing small business is borrowing money to be used for working capital from its investors. The terms on the CBN are that for every dollar that the business borrows under this structure, they agree to pay back a total of $1.30 or a 1.3 multiple on the capital raised. And that's repaid monthly over 4 years or on a 48-month period. So the way that these dollars get back to this, the way that these dollars get paid back is that the small business, who again is the borrower, agrees under the terms of the security to pay a fixed percentage of its monthly revenue to the investor every month until the $1.30 is repaid. And NextSeed's investment banking team, of which I'm a part, reviews the business's historical financial performance and other operating metrics to determine what the monthly percentage of revenues is that each issuer needs to repay in order to reasonably expect that over that 48-month period, that $1.30 will be repaid in full. However, it's important to note that if the full $1.30 hasn't been repaid to the investor at the end of the 48-month note term, any remaining amount is due on maturity. Also important to note is, although we are taking applications currently and will be launching the CBNs as soon as we approve them internally, and we're expecting about a week from the time we get the application to the time we approve them, so we'll be launching these imminently. The first monthly payment isn't due to investors under this structure until February of 2021. And the 48-month maturity term doesn't start until 2021. So effectively, you're getting cash in the very near term. You have effectively a deferral period, or what we're calling a grace period, until 2021. And then that's when the revenue sharing mechanism starts. That's when the 48-month period starts. And it's also important to note that there are incentives for the borrower to pay the note back early. We have structured this security such that if the note is repaid within 24 months, so that would be by January 2023, the amount to be repaid goes down from $1.30. Sorry, it goes down from $1.30 to $1.20 for every dollar borrowed. And then if the note is repaid within 12 months, so that'd be by January 2022, the amount owed is $1.10 for every dollar borrowed. So clearly incentives to repay the note early. Finally, it is worth noting that in order to make this program accessible to as many businesses as possible, we have lowered our minimum transaction amount, and we're allowing transactions to be subscribed and funded at only $10,000. So $10,000 is a minimum closing requirement for the collateral bridge note. So if an issuer launches a collateral bridge note transaction, they're free to shut it down and receive the financing once it reaches that $10,000 minimum, or they can leave it open with the goal of raising more. Obviously, the maximum size for any transaction that will be approved to fund on our platform will be a function of the business's size, their ability to repay the debt based on the historical performance, and other factors that we're going to look at as part of the underwriting team. And then finally, to make this as cost effective as possible for issuing companies, what we've done is we've reduced our placement fee from 10% of the capital raised, which is what we normally charge for this type of a product, to 4% of capital raised. So which is really just meant to cover our expenses. So for instance, a business who sold the minimum of $10,000 of CBNs on our platform would receive $9,600, and NextSeed basically would keep $400, or 4% of the $10,000 as our placement fee. So that's a little bit about the terms. And then if I can get to the next page here. Okay, application process and eligibility requirements. Look, in terms of how to apply and the information needed, we've tried to make this as straightforward as possible. In order to be eligible, applicants will need to undergo a streamlined due diligence process. I said our goal is to try to kind of get people through the process in about a week. And we'll need to show that the business has been impacted by the COVID crisis and that it was a viable, profitable business pre-COVID. Applicants will also need to be able to pass a criminal background check and cannot have filed a bankruptcy for the past 3 years. What we've done is we've set up an online application form or process at www.nextseed.com, and business owners can start the application process by filling out a couple of forms online and then uploading information through our secure platform, which will then be reviewed by the NextSeed banking team. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, what we've really tried to put in place here is a streamlined due diligence process and or an accelerated process. And by that, I don't mean that we're lowering our underwriting standards, but the idea here is that these applications are going to be noted as CBN products on the platform when an applicant applies. They're going to be prioritized because we know these businesses need the cash as quickly as possible. And since we've already set the terms of the structure itself, we can really spend our time focusing on the metrics that matter of the business and get answers turned around as quickly as possible. So that generally concludes my my prepared statements, but obviously if there are any questions, I'd love to open it up just to Q&A. I'll start my video here so you guys can see me.
Wonderful.
And, yeah, thank you so much. I hope that was, I know it was a little bit choppy because I was having some difficulties with my slides, but hopefully we got the information out there.
No. That was wonderful. And we're so glad that there's another option out there for businesses who, one, didn't get a PP loan or didn't get an EIDL loan. And the first question we have here is, you mentioned that business need to show past performance, profitability, or show a strong trend towards profitability. How far back does NextSeed look?
So I'm not muted. Okay. So what we're really going to focus on, to the extent that someone has, we're really focusing on 2019 numbers, final year-end 2019 numbers. Now, what we said in the application process was that you really only need to have been open for 90 days prior to the declaration of the emergency. Mm-hmm. So if this is really a new business that had opened, and even had only been, open for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, we will absolutely look at it. But I'd say for the majority of the businesses, what we expect is that they'll have been open for some period, maybe a year or longer. And what we're going to be doing from a diligence perspective, and really to get our hands on and around the economics of the business, I think we're really going to place disproportionate emphasis on 2019 performance.
Great. And we have another good question. You may have touched on this, but in general, how long is the process from application to funding receipt?
So normally speaking, when we do larger transactions, it's a fairly long process. It takes about 4 months. There's usually about a month before we launch a transaction live. And then if we're doing a transaction that's going to, where we're looking to raise $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $1 million, we'll leave the transaction open for 2.5 months, maybe 3 months, because at the end of the day, the investors, we tend to always get our investments filled out, but in terms of the timing on how they come in, it's a little bit anybody's guess. So what we suggest to issuers is leave the transaction open longer. If things move more quickly than we expect, we can always truncate the timing of the transaction. With regard to the CBN, as I mentioned, we're trying to do this on an accelerated time frame. So what we're really, our goal internally is from the time that we have the application completed online to the time that we turn around and launch the transaction publicly, we're hoping to do it in about a week time frame, order of magnitude, maybe a little bit more, probably not, a little bit less, but call it a week. Mm-hmm. And then in regard to how long the transaction stays open, I think that's going to be largely a function of, how much the business is going to be looking to raise. Obviously, the way we would, what we normally suggest and would suggest it here is, leave the transaction open for as long as, for a longer period of time that you anticipate, and then you can always shorten the time frame if you get the dollars, you meet that minimum 10,000, or you want to keep going for more. From a regulatory perspective, I believe that the offering on the crowdfunding platform has to stay open for a minimum of 21 days. So unless there's some regulatory loopholes that I'm not familiar with related to the COVID environment, I think in the ordinary course, what we tell people is the quickest you could get your money is 3 weeks from the time you launch a transaction to the time you can close it. And so all in all, we're probably talking a month, a week pre-launch for us to approve the transaction, and then a minimum of 3 weeks, 4 weeks to meet the regulatory requirements of leaving the transaction open.
Good. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have another question here. For those that are not familiar with crowdfunding, can you share a little of the basics of crowdfunding and how it is different from banks' traditional funding?
Sure. So, crowdfunding basically is a little bit like what it sounds like, which is you're raising funds from the crowd. And so these are non-accredited investors. These are normal people like you and me who have the ability to go on the NextSeed platform or other crowdfunding platforms like NextSeed's and can basically elect to buy securities in companies who are looking to raise capital, but can generally do it at a much lower minimum buy-in amount than it would traditionally be needed to do in the private equity world, for instance, where you need maybe $50,000 or $100,000 as the minimum investment size. So in this situation, NextSeed and the other crowdfunding platforms are largely acting as an intermediary or a conduit. But unlike a bank where you're actually borrowing the money from the bank, in this situation, what's happening is that you're borrowing money from your neighbors, local people who are out in the community. And effectively, the way that NextSeed creates the marketplace whereby the issuer who's looking to raise the capital and those investors who want to commit capital to the business meet on the NextSeed platform. And as I said, basically, the SEC regulations allow and have allowed as of 2016 this to be done via a web-based platform. And so the real punchline here is the people who normally wouldn't have been otherwise able to traditionally invest in private equity investments that were normally reserved for wealthier, larger check sizes can now do it, and they can do it at least on our platform with a minimum buy-in of $100.
Good. And we have another question here. So pre-COVID, crowdfunding was gaining popularity for new businesses and growth funding. Do you think that post-COVID, this will continue to be a strong, viable option for business funding?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I do. I think, it's interesting. We have a number of transactions on our platform currently. As a matter of fact, we launched one probably about 4 or 5 days ago. It's a company called Authentically American. We were looking to raise up to $500,000 for them. And that really was kind of growth and development capital. It was not a COVID specific situation. And we raised approximately $150,000 in the first 3 or 4 days for that company. So, that to me tells me that the crowdfunding world is alive and strong. That's our most recent example of a transaction that we launched very recently and has gotten tremendous and quick response. And to be honest with you, we believe that, small businesses especially, unfortunately, have had mixed experiences with their traditional lenders and banks, especially in relation to the PPP and the way that some money has gone to maybe some of the larger banks' customers and not the smaller banks' customers. And so, I don't know what the ultimate, fallout of that is, but I do think that, even now, maybe even more so than before COVID, small businesses are probably more aware now than ever that they really need to always explore and continue to explore as many alternative sources of liquidity as possible. And, it's interesting to see, again, platforms like ours and others in the crowdfunding space, who even in this crisis are continuing to really, do well by their clients, continuing to raise money. And I think that, again, as the COVID thing unwinds, crowdfunding as a concept will come back as strong or more stronger than ever.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And this is another great question. So the person said, this is great information. Her name is Bridget Dorian. She's president of the Fifth Ward Chamber of Commerce. And can she share this information with her members? So Jovan, this is going to be on our website, recording of this. Can I share your presentation with her, or can we put it on our website?
Absolutely. So what I can tell you for sure is that all the information that's on that's on those slides is on the www.nextseed.com website. I know that you're going to be rebroadcasting this. I'm probably going to check with our compliance people just to understand whether or not we can distribute these slides specifically. Sure. It's more of a regulatory issue, but if there's no regulatory issue, we would be delighted to get the whole point here is to get the word out to as many people as possible, let them know that we're open for business and we have a product that hopefully works for people.
Great. So wonderful. So Ms. Dorian, we'll get that out to you, and you're welcome to email me at francis@eecoc.org so that we can continue this communication and maybe share some other ideas. Thank you. Another question here. From your knowledge, what seems to be the standard industry that NextSeed supports, and what is the oddest non-traditional product or service NextSeed has helped fund?
So the first part of the question is I think fairly straightforward. I think what most of the companies, or pretty much all the companies that I'm aware of, have in common that we've supported historically have been that they've been small businesses. They've been largely brick and mortar, and they've been business to consumer. So, again, it's a business where the ultimate consumer, or I should say the business model is that the business has a direct touch with the client and with the customer. And I think that's really for two reasons. One is that, as I mentioned before, our mission statement really was to find a vehicle not only where people could have access to investments that they might not have heretofore had access to, but also that we would create some kind of a, community building aspect around this. And so the best way to build communities, in our view, is really to support local businesses, brick and mortar businesses, people who are in the community, anchor tenants. It helps real estate, it helps the local economy, it helps everything else. So I think by design, that was something that from a mission statement, we kind of knew we wanted to do. It also turns out, though, that from the business's perspective, one of the reasons, and I think one of the things that NextSeed does pretty well, is we try to create a situation where, we use the investment opportunity on our platform, not only as a way to raise capital for the business, but also as a branding opportunity and a customer outreach opportunity and a getting the word out opportunity for the business itself. So particularly in the context of a startup business or one that's, maybe just got a new product that's starting to hit grocery store shelves, anything where there's an interaction between the product and the ultimate end user, really is well suited for the NextSeed platform, again, because what the issuer is getting is kind of not only the cash in the bank, but they're getting the double benefit of all the social media marketing, the outreach, the branding benefits that really come along with the NextSeed financing. So I'm not trying to make that sound like a commercial, but I think our desire for community and the way that we do the branding and the investor outreach really kind of has made it to where B2C companies and particularly brick and mortar companies have done well on our platform. Having said that, we're open to and have done things that are not in the B2C space. To be honest with you, if I don't know the answer to your latter question, I'd have to ask some of my colleagues who have been around a little bit longer. Most of the things that I've seen since I've been at NextSeed have been fairly straightforward, restaurants, health studios, consumer packaged goods, boutique hotels, things. There's nothing I can put my finger on right now that I would say is too wild and wacky that we've done to date.
Great answer. And I think that marketing that you talked about is one benefit that is a benefit versus getting a traditional loan at a bank. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Is there a success story that, I know this is fairly new, but is there a success story out there that a company that's used that you can maybe share with us?
So I think you're probably talking about the CBNs or the collateral bridge note. I mean, there's a number of success stories, obviously, that where we've raised capital for very, very successful companies that are now very well established in the community and are very, economically and, fiscally or financially successful. In regard to the CBNs or the notes that I've been talking about in this particular product, we really structured and designed this product probably about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago when the COVID crisis was just emerging. So we've been taking applications for 10 days now. And we anticipate launching our first couple of transactions publicly within the next 3 to 4 days. So in regard to something I can point to that says this is a company that's actually been through it with this particular product, the answer is no, although what I would say is, give us a couple of days and you should be seeing you should be seeing the first rollout. And we expect a fairly significant wave of them to be coming after that.
Great. And I've got another question for you. During COVID, has NextSeed greatly impacted in their day-to-day operations, or was this an easy transition?
No, I mean, so we're all working from home. I'm probably one of the older guys at NextSeed, and so I'm probably one of the, I'm definitely one of the more technologically enabled guys, or less technologically enabled guys. So it's probably been a tougher transition for me than it has been for others. But no, the reality is that everything we do is tech enabled, and whether we're sitting in the office or we're all sitting at home, between Zoom and Ring Central and other apps like that, we're talking, dozens of times a week. All of our infrastructure, we have, common shared files and everything else up on our little intranet or whatever it is. So the answer is everybody's doing it from home, but in terms of the pace of work, honestly, it hasn't slowed at all. In fact, if anything, coming together with the CBN product and some other initiatives that we've been trying to deal with around COVID, we've probably just gotten busier over the last 6 weeks.
Great. And then I heard of a NextSeed through one of your associates, Alex, and she introduced us to a new product that she started called Lifeline. And I wondered, because a couple of our restaurants in here in the East End benefited from that program. Just real quickly, I wanted to know if you could share something about that to our listeners here and where they can maybe find more information about it.
Sure. So yeah, Life Fund, Alex and the team did a phenomenal job getting the Life Fund thing up and running. The concept around Life Fund was, in this COVID environment, really to tap into the latent demand that people all over Houston and all over the country have to do a couple of things. One is to support small businesses, especially in this case restaurants, and on the other hand, to give back to healthcare workers who are obviously doing so much and are on the front lines for the response in regard to this crisis. So the Life Fund really was again an internet or a platform enabled site where people could go and make donations to the Life Fund for the purpose of basically buying meals from certain local restaurants, of which I think you said there's a couple in the East End, for delivery to healthcare workers who obviously are working so hard during this time. And in regard to, if anybody's interested in that also can be found on the NextSeed website. There's a link to the Life Fund there. I believe that to date we've raised around $20,000 or maybe a hair under that in donations, again, and with the dual purpose of supporting the frontline healthcare workers and supporting the local restaurants, which is again obviously important to us, and really more importantly is important to our investors and the people in the community who really want to find a way to show up at this time.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I really like that incentive. If you do pay back your loan, it's 1.1, which is, it could be maybe a little bit more affordable than some of the other loans out there, especially if you get a great customer base out there and you're able to sustain your business once everything gets back to normal.
Right. I mean, the idea here, by saying we're not going to focus on startup companies, we're not going to focus on unproven companies for this. We're focusing on companies who have an existing franchise, who were working, everything was going good before COVID, they got whacked by COVID, and now we're giving them a bridge to kind of come back to life. And so what we're asking our investors to do really in this situation isn't so much to make a bet on, is this company's concept going to succeed, really? Right. Well, the bet that we're asking our investors to make is, number one, does this company have enough cash to get through the COVID crisis? And number two, when the world reopens, how long is it going to take them to get back up to normal? And we recognize that not everybody is going to bounce back as quickly, and that's why we've obviously structured this as a 48-month term or for maturity. But, again, I think that if you really think about the goal here, the goal is that this is supposed to be, near-term liquidity, cash funding to get them through a crisis. And so we want to be certain to create incentives so that, if people are able to reopen quickly, or, again, we're not starting our payment requirements until February of 2021. If the market opens, I don't know, in, October, or, if we're fully back to business by, November or something, there's another 3 months of kind of ramping up before these guys even have to start making payments. So the idea is basically that we wanted just to make sure to align incentives and give issuers the opportunity to get the best cost of capital they could by the lower multiples in the repayment scenarios, while at the same time having the flexibility to not be in default if it took a little bit longer for their rebirth or regeneration to eventuate.
Great. And I've got two more questions here. If someone wants to be an investor in NextSeed, is there a minimum investment amount that you ask for?
So the answer is for the regulation crowdfunding transactions, I'd say that by and large, the rule of thumb is that it's $100 is the minimum investment. So if you want to buy securities in one of our transactions, it's, generally speaking, $100. That is something that we discuss with the issuers, our clients who are raising capital, and there are occasions where sometimes we raise that minimum a little bit, but I'd say that 99% of the time, the minimum buy-in is $100.
Great. And then back to Lifeline, is there a minimum amount to donate to the Lifeline program?
I don't believe so. I should know that answer right off the top of my head, but the answer is I don't believe so. And if I do, if it is, it's small, but I don't believe there is a minimum.
Great. Well, I think that we've answered all of the questions here. Before I do my closing remarks, I didn't know if there's anything else that you thought of that you wanted to share with everyone.
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk to you guys. Obviously you guys are doing great work, and everybody at NextSeed is trying to do their part, and I know that together we're all going to get through this. My information is available on the website at NextSeed, or I think at the end of that presentation that we put up. We're open for business, and we're looking to do anything we can to be helpful. So please, if you think this would be helpful, don't hesitate to apply or contact us.
Great. And I think we're going to show that your contact information on the screen right now in case anybody wants to contact you and find the website. So that's perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening today. We will continue doing these every Tuesday, every Thursday, and then we'll also have our Feel Good Friday events, webinars to share with you. You can find this information on our website, eecoc.org. And again, if you haven't liked it already, please visit our East End Strong Facebook group page, and promote and service some of the restaurants and retail businesses that we have out there. Tomorrow again is May 1st, and a lot of business will be open. So we hope that you'll be kind and support as much as you can. Thank you very much. And we wish you all a safe and healthy day.